Hello, Psych 101 students. In Module 3, Chapter 4, we will look at Learning Objective 5, How do Adolescents Develop? And we'll start with physical development. Um, so, first of all, just a little note about the term adolescence. It comes from Latin. Adol, A-D-O-L, means adult, and escere, E-S-C-E-R-E, means becoming. And so etymologically, putting them together, it means becoming adult. So this change to adulthood really begins with puberty, which are the physical changes in the body that are part of sexual development. And the key to puberty, I mean, as the main purpose of what puberty is it's a transition to reproductive maturity. So you go from not being able to reproduce to having the physical potential for reproduction. And so the primary sex characteristics are the changes that affect your reproductive organs and genitals to make it, we call them primary sexual characteristics because those are what are needed to reproduce. The secondary sexual characteristics. Oh wait, first of all, before I get to that, so when the primary sex characteristics mature and you become, it makes it able that you become reproductive, or have the potential for reproducing. Um, there's a key moment that you could point to that kind of tells you when you've passed that line, that threshold. For women, it's the start of menstruation, which is known as menarche, menarche, menarche. It is the start of menstruation. So that's kind of the point you can look at as, oh, this is when this woman went from not being able to reproduce to being able to. And for males, there's a similar term called spermarchy. So Spermarche, which represents the boy's first ejaculation of semen. And now he is able to reproduce. Okay, so the primary sexual characteristics are, you know, um, are primarily involved in reproduction. The secondary sexual characteristics are all the other changes that accompany puberty, but they're not related to reproduction. Uh, Let me just go through kind of a list of things here. Some of the changes. Boys develop darker and thicker body hair on the legs, in the armpits, in the pubic area, and on the face and chest. They grow taller and they gain muscle mass. Their jaw becomes more angular. Girls develop darker and thicker body hair on their legs, in the armpits, and in the pubic area. They become taller, they grow breasts, their waists become more defined, and they gain more fat on their hips. Okay. Uh, the brain also changes during adolescence. First of all, synaptic connections are refined and gray matter increases. I've talked about pruning before. So pruning starts in mid to late childhood and continues into adolescence, where the brain is getting rid of unused connections, so it becomes faster and more efficient. The frontal cortex of the brain is not fully developed until the early 20s. In particular, the prefrontal cortex. Remember, that's the very front part of the frontal lobe, and it's involved in such things as decision making, impulse control, planning. Um, and once again, that's not going to be done until the early 20s. Um, it's kind of the last part of the brain that's still developing. An adolescent's limbic system, however, which is the motivational and emotional center of the brain, it tends to be more active than the frontal cortex because it finishes development early. Early in adolescence, that part of the brain becomes fully mature. And so this is why you see an increase in risk-taking behaviors in adolescence. The part of the brain, the limbic system that responds to taking risks and it responds to feeling excitement and pleasure and things like that, it's finished developing, and it kind of opens the world up for an adolescent to feel new forms of pleasure and excitement. And so that part of the brain finishes in early adolescence, and now you start looking for pleasure and excitement, and which it often may involve risk taking behaviors. I want to drive fast, I want to whatever, go on roller coasters, or I want to take some daring risk climbing on things or whatever it may be, trying new products like drugs or alcohol. Uh, but so part of your brain is kind of encouraging more risk taking or more, to seek out pleasure and excitement. But the part that, you may say, well, why don't we keep doing that all our lives? Well, the prefrontal cortex helps to control those impulses and helps to rein in those risk-taking behaviors. And so you see the risk-taking behaviors in between the limbic system finishing development and the prefrontal cortex, finishing development. And this is why when we get to adulthood, we take less risks, and we control our impulses, and we don't just act on emotions as much because the prefrontal cortex is very responsible for controlling impulses, and it's responsible for making better decisions and planning for things. Okay. The Adolescent Brain Cognitive Development ABCD study, launched in 2016, continues to provide findings related to cognitive, behavioral, and mental health outcomes. So this study, it tracks brain development from early childhood to early adulthood. So going right through all of adolescence, and the study has nearly 12,000 American subjects in it. So it is a large scale study, and it's been very good at learning about brain development and the effects of of different forms of brain development. I'll just give you one example of one finding from the study. They found that children who were exposed to alcohol during prenatal development, that is, the mother, drank while they were in the womb, they were more likely to try alcohol at an earlier age. And so you couldn't find this out in a study that just looked at one time period. Like, you couldn't tell at birth or during prenatal development. Like the what this study does is it's employing a longitudinal study where they're following the same group of people for many years, early childhood all the way up to adulthood. And so you see the outcomes of some of the things that may have happened to them earlier in life or in prenatal development. As adolescents develop us, wait, sorry, I'm just looking at my notes here. Okay, let me start over on this page. The quest for identity is a very important challenge during development, especially in Western individual cultures like ours, individualistic societies. Like we promote individualism in this country. the rights of the individual, and like kind of fly your freak flag, like be your own person, and um and so in countries like ours, this quest for who am I, your identity, um, is a very important undertaking. So the questions that you're attempting to answer are, who am I? Who do I love? How do I see myself? Um, all adolescents face these kinds of questions as part of their socio emotional development. Your identity can include many different parts or components. Uh, it's not just one single thing. So we have, for instance, a religious identity. What do I believe in that area? We have a political identity, a sexual identity. We have an occupation identity. What kind of work are you going to do? And a gender identity, etc. And there's more as well. But so it's all these separate components. When you try to, you're sometimes you're just perhaps trying to figure out one of them during adolescence at a time. But they all kind of come together, all these different separate identities to form, who you really are as a person. Um, so going back to the screen here, as adolescents develop a sense of identity of who they are influenced by many factors, including the culture in which they're raised and their beliefs about personal characteristics such as race, ethnicity, gender, and sexual orientation. I mean, obviously, the identity that two people develop can be very different, based on what what type of family they grew up in, their race and ethnicity, their what within America, what part of the country they grew up in, what their parents are like. I mean, all there's going to be a lot of cultural kinds of factors that affect what a person's identity is going to finally end up being. So one person who wrote a lot about identity development was Erikson. He has a theory we'll look at on the next slide. He has, which includes 8 stages of psychosocial development. And according to Erikson's theory, in adolescents face one of the most fundamental challenges: how to develop an adult identity in order to prosper, fit in, and prosper within society. His 5th stage is called identity versus role confusion. And this once again points to the task, or the what he called a crisis, of trying to figure out who you are. In order to do so, adolescents engage in a lot of role experimentation during adolescence in order to sort through conflicting values and ideas of who they should be and what they should think. And because you receive conflicting values from parents versus peers versus teachers and versus I don't know, media, and you kind of have to consolidate all these different ideas to figure out what's your path and who are you going to be. And so we try stuff out. I mentioned role experimentation. We for a while adolescents might dress in a certain style. Maybe they go goth for a while, and then maybe they leave that phase and they dress in a more professional manner, or perhaps they hang out with druggies for a while. Perhaps for a while they're in the nerd group. Like you try different things. You develop different relationships and friendships. Um, you do some experimentation and to figure out who you are. And this is one of the reasons you see actually like adolescents sometimes seem to bounce around. Like and they're one way one week and maybe a little bit different the next week. And it's and this is part of the process, though, that Erikson pointed out that we should expect it. It's natural. They're working through issues of who they are. So this is Erikson's complete theory shown here, at least the stages of his theory. Um, Once again, it's his theory of psychosocial development. Um, and let me just roughly explain it here. All right, so Erickson's theory has 8 stages. In each stage, there is what's called a psychosocial crisis with both a positive and a negative outcome. And so, how that stage is handled and what occurs during that stage would determine whether you're more towards the positive outcome or more towards the negative outcome. So I'm going to go through these really quickly without trying to explain every stage. But so the first stage is from 0 to 2, the infancy stage. And the psychosocial crisis is trust versus mistrust. And you may say, well, how are infants doing this? Like it's going to come from the type of caregiving you receive. If you receive sensitive caregiving, so you've got let's say a mother who always comes to you when you cry out and feeds you when you're hungry and changes you when you're wet and holds you when you're scared, you're going to believe like, you know, I I can trust, people are good. I can trust in people, because there's always somebody there for me. Now, if you had the opposite situation and you were, not, you often went hungry and your little belly hurt, and or you were left in dirty diapers for too long, or you weren't knowing no one came when you were frightened. I mean, you would develop a sense of mistrust in the world, and it's not just directed at that one person, your caregiver. It's a kind of a general feeling, and we probably all know people who are. Some people are very trustful of others, and some people are very mistrustful of others. And Erickson says this is where it may have started in the caregiving that you received in the first 2 years of life. So I spent a little time on that first one, but I'll try to go a little quicker through the rest here. So toddler 2 to 3 is autonomy versus shame and doubt. Autonomy is about developing independence, like feeling like you can do things on your own. You couldn't do anything on your own in the first stage. You needed complete care, but now at from 2 to 3, you start trying to do things on your own, and you feel proud when you can. And in the preschool ages, 4 to 6, we get initiative versus guilt. Initiative is about um, making some of your own choices, um, and so you feel like you're making a purposeful impact, and it might even be something as simple as like choosing your own cereal in the morning or what to wear during the day. And you'll see preschoolers, push against limits and against rules sometimes because they want to make some of their own choices. Childhood, 7 to 12, these are the elementary school years. You develop a sense of industry, hopefully, versus inferiority. Industry means like a sense of competence or confidence. I mean, you feel like I'm good at certain things that are useful in this world or in this society. If you don't feel like you're good at anything, you might develop an inferiority complex. During adolescence, where what we're talking about now is identity versus role confusion. As it says here, by exploring different social roles, adolescents develop a sense of identity. You go into young adulthood in the 20s. The key psychosocial crisis is developing a sense of intimacy. It's the time to start forming meaningful, close relationships, in an intimate manner. Um, in middle adulthood, 30s to 50s, the psychosocial crisis is one of generativity versus stagnation. And generativity is developing a sense that you're leaving something behind in the world. As you get into and you get going through middle adulthood, you start realizing that you're halfway or more through your life, and you start thinking about you know what am I leaving behind? Is there what's going to be left after I'm gone? And you see a lot of people in middle adulthood do things to promote generativity, like contribute to maybe building a new school or a community center, or maybe it's just the raising of their children. They take great pride in that, or it might be helping others in one way or another. And then in old age, 60s and beyond, integrity refers to a feeling, you try to develop a feeling that you lived a life that you're okay with, satisfaction that you lived a good life. And if you feel, Erickson says, if you can feel that way, then you can you won't really fear death, and you can enjoy your remaining years. If, however, you feel like, oh, I've got unfinished business, and there's things I still need to do before I die, because I need to make up for the mistakes I've made or something like that. Like he says, those people will feel despair because they're fearing their oncoming death, and that they're running out of time. And he says, it can make the remaining years very unhappy as somebody as the person searches to reach a sense of integrity. Okay, so each of these crises, that cover the lifespan, each of the stages builds upon earlier stages, and you carry the positive or negative outcome with you into the later stages. It becomes part of who you are. So these positive and negative outcomes aren't just for that stage; they become part of your overall personality of who you are. So and once again, they affect later stages. So let me just show you one example. In adolescence, we the key task or crisis is to develop a sense of identity. Imagine you don't do that, and you haven't really thought about where you're heading in life, or who you are, or what you believe in or value, and you move into the young adulthood stage where you're supposed to be developing long-term intimate relationships. It might be pretty hard to do that if you don't have a sense of who you are. No one's going to, maybe adults don't like partners that, don't know who they are or aren't heading anywhere in life. So, because, to be intimate with somebody, you want to know what they think and what they believe. And, you want to become connected to that level. If you don't have personal an identity with personal values and ideas and things like that, then you're not going to be very very attractive to developing a long term relationship with someone. So a negative result in one stage can directly affect on upcoming stages. Oh yeah, let's go on here. That's Erickson's psychosocial development theory. Um, Parenting styles and influences. As adolescents develop their own identities, they come into more conflict with their parents. And this is because adolescents are searching for a unique identity that's all their own and that's separate from their parents. So adolescents will start to have different viewpoints than their parents, or different beliefs than their parents. This doesn't really happen in childhood. We tend to just, because we don't quite have the mind for it yet, we tend to just follow whatever our parents say and agree with everything our parents believe. But remember, as we get into adolescence, we reach Piaget's fourth stage, where we can now start to think about things in a more in more hypothetical ways, um, and imagine you know different different scenarios, different ways of being. You can imagine how your parents could be different. You might question some of the beliefs that you were given to you in childhood. You might question your religion, or you might go against the politics of your parents. And this is once again normal. You're searching for your own unique identity in adolescence. Who am I? Separate from my parents and separate from others. Okay, parenting styles is a topic that we'll now look at, and we're going to look at four parenting styles listed here: neglectful, permissive, authoritarian, authoritative. And you can see that each one is categorized by either low or high demand and low or high responsiveness, which leads to this following table. And this comes from a researcher named Diana Baumrind, Baumrind. And this is what she's mainly known for, is her research on parenting styles and coming up with these categories. So you can see the chart there. These styles arise from two major variables. Demandingness, either low or high demand, and that's like how much are you setting rules with your children, and um, like how having expectations for them, and having limits for their behaviors. And then on the left, we see the other very key variable is responsiveness. So how much do you interact and respond to your children, interact with them and respond to them? Anyway, so let's look at the four styles. So low demand and low responsiveness is called neglectful. You're not really parenting much. So the parents are inattentive and uninvolved without clear rules and limits. So they don't have rules or limits for the kids. Also, they tend to be indifferent to the child's needs. I mean, like I said, they're not really parenting. This is the category that has the worst outcomes for children. And you might find neglectful parents like in a situation where perhaps the parent or parents have mental illness or and so they're not responsive, or maybe they are um, some kind of addicts, like drug addicts or something like that, or alcoholics, and so something else is taking away from the time that a parent would normally be parenting. I mean, it's taking something else is taking their focus, or they may just be adults that didn't really want kids, and so they don't want to do much to raise them. Anyways, okay, going down to permissive, low demandingness but high responsiveness. Um, so these parents, they're highly responsible. They're very involved within their children's lives as far as um, talking to them and and encouraging them and things like that. But they're not good at setting rules and limits. They don't, they rarely use punishment, and they indulge the child's wishes. Um, when I think of permissive parenting, the stereotype that comes to my mind is like kind of like a real hippie parent, which is like, oh, you be you. Like, I'm not going to tell you what to do. Anything you decide to do is fine. Like, because you're your own person, and I just love you, whoever, however you are. But if you're not, when you're not setting limits and rules and directing a child, I mean, you this kind of parenting style can end up with real bratty children that tend to become unresponsive to parental authority or adult authority in general. I mean, um, and so they may act out in school settings and things like that because they've never had to control their behavior. They stay up as late as they want, they eat what they want, etc. Okay, moving over to authoritarian, top right. This is they have a lot of rules and limits, high demanding. They're highly demanding, but they're low on the responsiveness scale. So let me read what they have here. First, strong expectations for children to obey strict rules with limited emotional or psychological support. They typically have, strict punishments for not following the rules. My stereotype for this type of parenting is military style. Like these are the rules. They're laid out, and you get to bed by 9 p.m. sharp. Like and there's a punishment if they're still up at 5 or 10 after 9, and there's no because they're low on the responsive scale. There's not a lot of give and take. I mean, the rules have to be followed. There's no compromises. There's punishments that are talked about beforehand for breaking rules, and you don't get a lot of back and forth between the parents and children. And the children in this scenario often will feel unheard. They may become shy, for instance, because they've never had a voice within their family. Um, so it can have negative outcomes, although, there are cases where it's used successfully, this form of parenting. What we consider the best form of parenting, at least in our society, is authoritative parenting. So you are demanding as a parent. You have rules and limits for the children, but you're also highly responsive. So you're providing support to them, emotional and psychological support, and you explain the need for rules, and you are willing to compromise at times. So because you always listen to your kids, so you don't just if you don't always stick to straight up the rules. So if the child wants to stay up past 9, their regular bedtime, and you would ask them why, and if they have a good reason, then you might say, okay, tonight, yeah, I understand you want to watch that program from 9 to 9:30 that's really important to you. Then sure, and so you compromise when it makes sense, and you have discussions with them. So they learn that you're flexible, but you still maintain the rules and but it's you typically aren't going to use any real strict punishments, but it's all about relationship maintenance. You're always there. You're always willing to talk to them. They know they can always come to you, um, and so the child is actually encouraged to follow the rules and the limits that you set because because you've set up the kind of relationship that makes them want to do right by you and to make you proud and so anyways this is once again considered the best type of parenting, at least in our society. Okay, let's go on. So we're gonna look at peer influence here and bullying. So peers play a critical role in identity development. Just to connect it to a previous topic, and so adolescents tend to. Oh wait, where am I here? Sorry, I went too far. Adolescents tend to develop strong friendships with peers who share similar interests to them and similar values to them. Um, because these peer groups will reinforce the adolescent's identity choices. So you're working on your own identity. It's nice to be around people that share, similar values and similar visions to you. If you think academics is really important, you're not going to hang out with people that are dropouts from school. You're going to want people that share similar values and then they support the choices you've made on what you value in life. Okay, going on to bullying. I don't have much to add here. I'm just going to quickly read through this with you. You can look at it. Bullying occurs when a person repeatedly acts aggressively in an unwanted way. There are four types of bullying. So physical bullying, you're punching somebody or doing other physical behaviors like punching, kicking, slapping, whatever. Or you're threatening somebody in a physical man, you're threatening to be physically aggressive. Verbal is name calling or making offensive remarks. Social bullying is excluding someone from a group on purpose. Um, and this may be by you may be like we're not going to hang out with Lisa anymore, or it may be spreading gossip about her. Lisa's been doing this lately, so she's not our friend. So you're harming someone's character and you're harming their relationships. Cyberbullying is sending intimidating text messages or posting pictures online or things like that, um, or nasty comments about somebody. To take if you witness someone being bullied, if you feel safe doing so, you should try to stop the bullying on the spot. Find out what happened, talk to the participants, and support the individual involved. And particularly the one being bullied, obviously, but the bullier needs forms of support as well. There's a reason he or she has become a bully or is engaging in bullying. Maybe they have family problems at home or things like that. No one just chooses to be a nasty person. There's usually there's what psychology shows us constantly, developmental psychology. There's always reasons for our behaviors, and within your environment or within your family or whatnot. And so even somebody that bullies, they need support as well if you want to help them not to become a bully, but certainly support the person being bullied the most or first, as your first priority. Okay. The last topic in this section in this learning objective is morality, and we will look at moral reasoning and moral emotions. I'm going to start with the moral emotions first. And so this includes such things as embarrassment and shame. And you could add guilt to this list and pride. And these are all considered self conscious emotions. The self-conscious emotions because they either enhance or they harm your sense of self. So if you feel embarrassment or shame or guilt, it's harmful to your sense of self. If you feel pride, it enhances your sense of self. So if you do something wrong or immoral, then you will feel bad about it, and so because of these negative emotions, you don't like to feel that way. So this is some people will have put forth the idea that this is what causes you to avoid immoral, behaviors. You don't want to feel bad, basically. And if you do something good, that's something that's really good or helpful or moral, then you feel good about your actions, and it enhances your sense of self. It enhances your pride in yourself and who you are, and you can feel as like a good person. So it makes sense that emotions, certainly affect our morality. We don't want to do things that we're going to regret and feel bad about later. We want to do things that we can take pride in later. Um, the second part here is moral reasoning, which is thinking about like your thought process about morality. And so it attempts to look at questions such as, when is it acceptable to take an action that may harm others or that may break implicit or explicit social contracts. And we use our moral reasoning to solve these types of dilemmas. Um, and these arise throughout our lives. Everyone's going to face moments where you've got to make tough choices, and it's hard sometimes to figure out what's right. I mean, life is complicated. It's not all easy black and white choices. And uh, and and this is where moral reasoning comes in, when you have to really think about what the right thing is to do. And one person who studied this is Kohlberg. You can see his name at the top there. He studied moral decision making. He studied it directly by using moral problems or dilemmas to see what principles people use to solve them. He would present a moral dilemma, and then he would ask a whole series of questions about what the person, would do in that circumstance or what they believed is the right thing to do. And and his initial studies included older children and adolescents of different ages. He wanted to see more, the how more morality developed during those years. Um, what he came up with was a theory that has three major levels, and each level has two stages within it. So there are a total of six stages. We're not going to look at the stages. We're just going to look at the three major levels. So the first one is called pre-conventional. It's the earliest level of moral development. At this level, self-interest and event outcomes determine what is moral. This is the first stage. The focus at this stage is on punishment and reward. And so think you picture children, young children at least. Uh, so what's right is what you're rewarded for. Oh, I know if I do this, um, dad will say good job, or mom would be proud of me for doing this. Yeah. So you want rewards. Maybe you're going to gain something, like whether it's praise or something tangible. Maybe you get some kind of reward or certificate for doing a good deed at school. And what's wrong is what we're punished for. So if you know something's going to lead to some form of punishment, then you know that's that's immoral. That's wrong. So you try to this is what drives you. It's not nothing more complicated than that. If you do this behavior, it leads to punishment. So don't do that one. And this behavior leads to good outcomes. Um, okay. As we and that describes most of childhood, this first level. As we get into adolescence, early adolescence, you start moving into the conventional level. Um, at this level, societal laws and the approval of others determine what is moral. So the focus in the conventional level is on societal values. Right is whatever society approves of, and wrong is what society disapproves of. So laws are really important at this level. If something's against the law, then it's wrong. If if there's not a rule or a law against it, then it's an okay or it's a good behavior. Um, and and so we during the conventional level we try to follow the rules of society. Um, the majority of people in adolescence and adulthood throughout adulthood are at the conventional level. There's only a small percent of people that make it to the third level, the post-conventional level. So, and this is, if you think about society, most people are there. We are rule followers. We believe that we should follow the laws and rules of our particular society that we're in. Where if for the people that make it to the post-conventional level, maybe about 10% of society, it's the highest level. And at this level, decisions about morality depend on abstract principles and the value of all life. So the focus at the post-conventional level is on internal moral principles. So what's right is what protects fundamental human rights and values. What's wrong is what contradicts those rights and values. At at the post-conventional level, at this point, you've moved beyond just following what the laws say are right and wrong. If you disagree with the law, you won't follow it. So you if you get to the post conventional level, you're willing to sacrifice your own safety at times in order to do what you feel is right. And so think of somebody like Gandhi, who is one of the examples, that's been used as that he was certainly at the post conventional level. Like he was always willing to be thrown in jail, or his life was often at risk because he would always follow what his conscience told him was right, even though he knew he would get punished for it, and that he might be jailed or even killed for it. And Mother Teresa has been mentioned as well as a person. But anyways, it's at this level you're willing to break laws if they're wrong, and you're willing to stand up for what you believe at right, even at personal risk. And so a lot, like I said, most people don't make it to this level. Is you have to have really firm beliefs that you've worked on, and that become part of your core in order to take a stand against things that you believe are wrong. And that will conclude learning objective 5 from module 3.